If you haven't heard, Thrive is Mayor President Sid Edwards', in my opinion, lazy attempt at addressing the budget hole left by the incorporation of the city of St. George. To make this happen, Thrive would renew and redirect a portion of the property taxes known as millages, as well as some of the savings from the public library system, mosquito abatement, and Council on Aging, and put that into the city parish general fund. These proposals are appearing as three separate items on the ballot. Some people might think that this problem started back in February when the mayor essentially blindsided the library and the community with what was then called Revive. We were told Edwards was going to boost police salaries and buff up our public safety efforts. But if you attended those Metro Council meetings, you might remember Baton Rouge police officers filling seats and lining the walls of the council chambers, intimidating the public and allowing very few of us to sit in on the debate between funding the library or lining police pockets. Fast forward to now, the mayor's 2026 budget proposal threatens to cut 400 positions within the city parish government and the public defender's office by 22%. All this despite claiming an all-out war on crime, even with the public defender's office defending almost 88% of all criminal cases in the Baton Rouge Criminal Court each year. But I want to go back a bit. I want to talk about how we ended up here in the first place. I'm here with Votes Director of Policy, Checo Yancy. Checo, plain and simple, how did we get here? Take us back to 2019. What happened?
Well, if we be honest with ourselves and we take ourselves back, we didn't get blindsided. We realized that St. George wanted to become a separate entity and a separate city. And by leaving the city of East Baton Rouge and going into their own separate ways, then that really what the mayor at that time, Sharon Weston Broom, and others made a big bang about. It would drain some of the funds that's in the coffers of East Baton Rouge Parish. And now we're seeing that, and I think most folks have forgotten that in 2019, the plaintiffs at that time, pro temp Lamont Cole, city councilman, and Sharon Weston Broom, the mayor at that time, they actually filed suit to try to stop the big money grab. So if you really look at it, they fought for a year or so, a couple of years, trying to show that if you separate from the city, you didn't draw district lines, then you're going to take money that's going to be detrimental for the police, for the firemen, for all of the functions that we do in East Baton Rouge Parish.
And this didn't just happen in 2019. That prior to that, the St. George had been fighting to become a city for about 6 years prior to that.
Right.
And a lot of people ask, like, what is the difference between St. George versus Central versus Zachary? Why is it such a big deal that St. George wanted to break away when there wasn't that much commotion when these other cities decided to break away?
You know, that would be a matter of opinion. I mean, I saw it as personally that people wanted to be separate and they wanted to be equal, but they didn't have the funding. So the best way to get the funding was to take it from the parish of East Baton Rouge. And when that came about, I think people have forgotten that we fought this fight in East Baton Rouge Parish for many, many years. But there was a faction of people that wanted to separate themselves and have their own entity. Which, you know, I mean, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? It's a bad thing for East Baton Rouge Parish because after that happened with all of the struggles and everything, then they were told that they owed this new city, St. George, millions of dollars.
55 million to be exact.
Well, okay. If you look at that, that took out of the coffers of East Baton Rouge Parish Treasurer. Okay, so I've never really understood what was really going on until I read some of the lawsuit with Lamont Cole and Sharon fighting for the city at that time. She was married, fighting and fighting and fighting, and getting turned down at every road, and ended that because neither one of them lived in the new boundaries, then they was disqualified as plaintiffs, from what I've learned and what I've read. And that's just plain and simple. I'm not an attorney or anything, but just reading it, and over the years of understanding and trying to really understand what's happening, is that's what they were fighting for. And I think most people have forgotten that Lamont Cole being pro temp, and at that time Sharon Western Broome was mayor, and then the election came. And then we had some very viable candidates in the race, some big names. I look at it that the legacy of, if you go way back with Kip Holden and what the city had accomplished, and then we get I think Ted James was in the race, Sharon was in the race, and then we had Sid Edwards, a coach. And to the surprise of everyone, he won straight out. But then when you really look at the vote, and here at Vote and being a policy director and what kind of work we do, we look at the Secretary of State's website, we look at the numbers, we look at everything, and we found out that the turnout that day was very light. It ended up, election day was a cold day, if I remember correctly. It was, I remember going to a couple of the headquarters, going around the city, and it was a cold day, so the voters didn't come out, and now we're in this mess.
I'm glad you brought that up. So let's talk about Mayor Coach Sid Edwards for a second, because there's been conversation around Thrive, and if it wasn't going to be him, whoever was in the mayoral position would have had to make these tough decisions about this budget hole that we're having to fill. I think a lot of the community's issue with how he went about it was that he didn't get community input on how to fill that budget hole.
Well, I think he got community input, but it was his kind of community input. He had input, he had people around him, and I think folks, not to, I guess, dodge this subject or anything, when they realized that the city of East Baton Rouge Parish was going to have to give this money to St. George. I remember asking a couple of people during the time that St. George was getting the services, was any of that deducted from, because all the time the lawsuit was going on, everybody had garbage, they had all of the benefits that the city gives. And I'm still not clear if that was even figured into all this mess, okay? But the people that Sid had around him, you have to remember, Sid was a coach, good coach. And after he was elected, this was another high step for him to be in the city. So I doubt if he knew where the executive bathroom was, but he had to get some people around him to sit down and say, hold up, we got to pay all this money out. So where can we find this money? So now you start scraping money, and then you decide that you're going to take money from the library, you're going to take money from council on aging, you're going to take money from mosquito abatement. And it seems that if you read in my research, what I've seen is that the library, a few years back, the voters agreed for the millage to fund the library, not to fund St. George or not to fund anything else. They agreed to fund the libraries. And although I maybe totally satisfied with some of the libraries in some of the communities, but they did a great job. They were frugal with their money. They had money left, and they did what they were supposed to do. So if you got several $1 million, then you got it in your coffers, but you have it to to do what the voters say you have to do for the libraries. And then all of a sudden now, Sid comes in and says, I'm going to take that money. That's just not fair. And then you look at Council on Aging that help all of the elderly people in this parish, people that can't help themselves with food and other things, and then you target them, and then you target mosquito abatement, and you call everybody together, those three entities, in front of all of the hierarchy that he has around him, and you said, now I'm going to take some of your money, and you need to come aboard, and if you don't come aboard and don't agree, I'm just going to take it anyway. So to save face, the way I saw it and went to a couple of town hall meetings is, you have the council on aging, you have the library directors, and you have mosquito abatement. You come in and you explain it to the communities that, hey, you need to vote for Thrive so they can get this money. And the town hall that I went to, Sid was not there. It was in the black community. So his representatives was there, and someone got mad with me because I asked the question, well, where's the mayor? This is his proposal. This is his explaining to do, but you're only his representative, and you know how that's going to go. So that's how that went. But now we're in this thing that they're telling us come November the 15th, I need to vote for Thrive. And now you're finding out that, he comes on there and says all these areas that's going to be cut, but the police department is not going to be cut, which I understand. That makes great sense. Everybody wants to be protected. I want to be protected. And you're not going to cut the fire department. Makes great sense, because nobody wants their home to be burned down or the fire department, the people that take care of us. Sounds real right. Except you said that you're going to cut the DA's office, you're going to cut indigent offender, the programs that help people, you're going to cut these programs. You have this knife at my throat saying, if I don't vote for these, then I'm going to cut these. And my question was, and we didn't get an answer to that until I think it was yesterday, a day before, I saw on the news that now we're finding out that some people in his office may get cut, because I often wondered about that. You got your salary, you didn't take no cut. If you're the leader, you should have took 50% cut of your salary. I mean, all of your top people, and then you hire an aide, CAO, at $130,000 a year with all benefits. So hold up, now you're saying we're going to cut one way, but you're hiring in another way. And maybe I'm just a little old country boy and I don't know nothing, but to me that really don't show good faith.
And I agree. And for people listening, that discrepancy is so large. The police department, their budget is going to remain at $99.5 million.
Which I can understand that, because, the police are our gatekeepers to make sure that they take care of we're safe. So I understand that.
Right. And like you were saying, the public defender's office is only getting $855,000. That's a huge, to have the police, protect and serve, however you want to view them or say it. They're arresting people, they're putting people in jail who need representation, but we can't give them the proper representation because the public defender's office is completely underfunded and overworked when they receive upwards of 88% of the criminal cases in East Baton Rouge. And I think the other side of this that I find very frustrating, and we don't have to get into deconsolidation, but what I appreciated at least about Sharon Weston Broom in this lawsuit, their drive to defend the residents of Baton Rouge. Because we have a mayor-president, their allegiance is to the cities that make up East Baton Rouge Parish. But as a citizen of Baton Rouge, I'd also like for us to have nice things.
And I'm probably gonna get a lot of flack for this, but in reading what the media put out, and sometimes the media can be wrong, but we fact checked everything. Well, here we are today. You're asking me to vote for something. If I don't vote for it, you're gonna cut these things. But before he came into the mayor's race, he hadn't voted 8.5 years. So how you ain't voted for nothing for the city of Baton Rouge because you were coach and you were taking care of the kids, and from what I understand, a great job. Great job. But here's a person had not voted for 8.5 years. His only vote was when he became mayor. And now you coming to the public and saying, you need to get out and vote. Doesn't sound correct to me. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but, and I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for this. But, hey, that's just, they say if you don't speak up, then you'll slap me once if I don't say nothing to you. Next time, you're going to punch me in my mouth. If I don't say nothing, you're going to kick me in my behind. So that's what it seems to be, that you got Indigent Defender Board coming out and begging the community, please vote for this. You got the DA now saying, please vote for this. If you don't vote for this, I'm going to get rid of DAs. People go to other jobs. The indigent offenders and all these people. You're going to take money from the library. You're going to take money from mosquito baby. What's going to happen in the summertime when, say we get a lot of rain and mosquitoes here, and then you're going to, council on aging. We just saw the government shut down. If it hadn't have been for the council on aging and other folks, charities, organizations to feed our people, because whether we realize it or not, there are poor people. There are some people that just cannot take care of themselves, and that's what we're supposed to do. That's what the Bible says anyway. And from what I understand, the mayor is a religious person, but you can't rob Peter to pay Paul, and then you make a big hire just a few days ago for $130,000. To me, you should have been saving that money. That's the money you leave in the coffers.
Right. It feels counterproductive to make
cuts. That don't make sense. If I'm telling them I'm saving for my scooter, but I'm gonna go and buy a Mercedes. That just doesn't make sense. But that's the politics that we're in. And then we found out that only 38.9% of the people came out to vote. And he still won, but I think people have forgotten that there was a Lamont Cole, that was Sharon Weston Broom, and some other citizens of the city of Baton Rouge that brought this lawsuit, because it was very important that we not have a St. George. But the powers that be, now we got a St. George, and this is the mess that we're in.
And I think, I'll speak for me personally, and I know a lot of other community members feel this way, but to come in and basically have somebody back you into a corner at a time like this, in the times that we're in, I think that really turned a lot of people off. I voted no. I know a lot of other people are voting no. And I just hope that there's a lesson in this for this administration over the next 3 years, that nothing about us without us.
Well, that's a good thing. I voted early already, and I've had people tell me that you need to vote. Yes, you need to vote. But having the knowledge and the understanding that I have, and I am a nobody. I'm just Checo Yancy. I only have one vote, okay? But my vote was a no, because I didn't think it was right that the way that this is going about, the way that you are raiding the coffers of some of the other organizations that have gotten the citizens to vote. And that's what I think people have forgotten. People voted for the millage for the library. They didn't vote for somebody to come later and raid that to say that they saving the day. And that's all they're saying. They are saying they're going to save the day. I'm sure that there's some funds that could be found. I'm sure that, it's hard to find $55 million. It's hard to find 55, and that's why I believe that they fought so hard to let folks know that this was going to happen. And I think that's the story people need to know.
I actually think there's $55 million in this oil and gas industry that we have that we keep giving tax exemptions to. But that's a different
That's a whole different conversation. I mean, we saw the city council last night give tax cuts to unknown concerts coming in for LSU, and I'm not against LSU, so I don't want anybody to say I'm against LSU. And I realize they're trying to, do something with Smoothie King and all those things. But when you get into these situations, then we need to make sure that we have all the facts. I think people need to know what's going on. And I have friends who work for the city. And, I want to be clear about that. I don't want to see anybody lose their job. I was at a meeting last night when the head of the public defender's office was begging people to vote yes for Thrive, and I had to let her know I've already voted early. My mind is made up, and my mind is made up based upon the knowledge that I've had. And, I sat down the other week and actually went back through and looked at the lawsuit and looked at what Councilman Cole and Mayor Sharon Weston Broom was trying to prove to the courts that what was going to happen. And now we are seeing this. And it's just not fair to me. That's just one person's opinion.
I do think you share the opinion of many, but I think that's a good place to end. So LSU this Saturday is election day. LSU has a game also, but we know that it's our civic duty is more important than football, in my opinion. So if you can, please make it out to vote on November 15th.
Make sure that you do your civic duty and go out and vote Saturday. And hey, show that you care about the city of Baton Rouge.